www.vintagegamer.com.
Welcome back, Vintage Gamers. Today we are looking at Sega GT for the Sega Dreamcast. This was Sega's answer to the PlayStation 1's Gran Turismo. And it is a sim racer, which is unusual for Sega. They have a proud, fabulous history of excellent driving games. Outrun, Hang On, Sega Rally, Daytona USA, all excellent racers. But those are arcade racers, and this is a sim racer. And while this game received mostly positive reviews at the time, it just wasn't up to par with Gran Turismo. Nobody was going to ditch their PlayStation and run out and buy a Dreamcast for Sega GT. It just comes up short. The car selection isn't there, the track selection isn't there, but it's a decent driver in its own right. It's an adequate sim racer, and even though there's some control issues, it's really not bad. Compared to most racing games of the time, the load time on this is surprisingly short. Still annoying, but surprisingly short, especially compared to Gran Turismo. Gotta give Sega props on that. I'm recording this in, March of 2016, and obviously the graphics don't hold up to today. This game is nearly 16 years old. But it's still, the backgrounds, the track, even the cars to a certain extent, considering nobody had high-def TVs, and this is being played over RCA cables and on HDMI, etc. It looks surprisingly decent. I'm not going to go so far as to say it has aged well or anything like that, but it looks surprisingly decent. As you can see, I'm all over the track. One of the common complaints for this game was the controls, and I really have to agree with that. The Dreamcast controller in itself, I don't think is the problem. Although it is kind of clunky, it's a little awkward. You're using the triggers up on the top for the brake and the gas, and you go to brake and your thumb inadvertently hits the analog stick or pushes the analog. You're just kind of all over the place. That's one. If there were more options for setting up the controls the way you like them, that's one thing I would have appreciated back at the time. I think there is a setting for the A and B buttons, but yeah, that also felt a little awkward. And it's almost like, and it is a sim game. I'm not complaining, but you guys are just going to have to take my word for it. If there's one genre of gaming I'm good at, it's driving games, and even I was just all over the place here. It's definitely a finesse game, and I think it's something maybe you get used to, but it's unnecessarily difficult, and I think controls are partially to blame. Looking at the backgrounds, the track, the cars, you can really see where Gran Turismo had just been a game changer. Probably, and maybe some of you are going to jump all over me on this, but Gran Turismo was probably the biggest game changer in the driving game genre since Pole Position. I don't think that's an overstatement, and so many games after it, like Sega GT, all took their cues from Gran Turismo. You can really see and feel the influence. I'm not the biggest fan of the menu system on this game. I also find it a bit clunky. And I just think it could have been laid out better. The interface could be better. I don't know any other way to say it. The car selection, while there's a fair amount of cars to go through and drive and enjoy, it doesn't even compare with Gran Turismo. And I hate to keep harkening back to Gran Turismo, but at the time, that thing dominated. A lot of people bought a PlayStation just for that game. But they're compared to other driving and racing games at the time, there's a fair selection here. Now here I am with the chick car, the Mazda Miata. Everyone calls it a chick car, but I never see chicks driving them. I always see guys driving them. And if my fat ass could fit in one, maybe. I don't know. I'm too lazy to shift. I like an automatic. And here we got a really nice American Southwest desert level. I mean, you got to remember, this is 2000. This looked really good for the time. And you know, there is a lack of track selection. I gotta admit that. And again, with the Gran Turismo comparisons, but I mean, that's who Sega GT was going after, so that's who we got to compare it to. You know, the diversity and the track selection just isn't as plentiful as gamers were already used to from Gran Turismo, which was released almost 2 years before this. And the cars, mostly Japanese cars, and that might have been, the Dreamcast was a much bigger success in Japan, so cater to your audience somewhat, I guess. I think that's why it's predominantly Japanese cars. There is a Viper and a Mustang, and no Corvette. I don't remember Corvette. And no old cars. I think that's one thing that really grabbed everyone's imagination in the original Gran Turismo. There weren't that many old cars, but there were a few muscle cars, American muscle from the 60s. The C2 Corvette, I think it was a 67 Vet with a 427. That was the fastest car in that game, I believe, amongst other things. And it was just very, very cool. Look at all the windmills in the background and radio towers and stuff. This was really awesome for 2000. I'm sure some of you younger guys are rolling your eyes going, oh, this looks like crap. Well, you know, things have, even just in 15, 16 years, which sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. Things have really evolved. And it's kind of a sunset, dusk time approaching, and the lights are on. I mean, this was cool stuff, and Sega did a really good job with the environment and the car rendering. I mean, you know, you can't mistake that for anything other than a Miata. It's clearly a Miata. It looks good. Now, there's something that hasn't changed in 15 or 16 years. I know they keep releasing new generations of the Miata, but they all look the same to me. You know, with some subtle differences, of course. Here's the Mustang I mentioned just a minute ago. Pretty typical year 2000 Mustang. And, you know, I'll bottom line it for you guys. If you're having a Dreamcast kick, if you're really into your Dreamcast right now and you feel like playing a racing sim for some reason, this is a good way to go. You know, really though, if you're playing around with the Dreamcast and you just want a racing game in general, I would tell you to check out Sega Rally, maybe 4x4 Evo or Daytona USA. I think those controls are much more forgiving and they're just much more fun games. I don't know why you'd want to invest a ton of time and effort with a racing sim on a system that's, you know, or on that's 16 years old. But you know, if you do, this is an adequate alternative to Gran Turismo. But keep in mind, it is not Gran Turismo by any stretch. But Sega did overall do a nice job. And that is going to do it for this episode of VintageGamer.com. As always, I am Mark, and give me a like, give me a subscribe, say something in the comments. It would be wonderful if it was a nice or productive comment, but if you want to call me a fucking asshole, you can do that too. There's no censorship here, and you know, as always, the language is rated R, so do whatever. See you next time. Sit, Dick, sit. Good cat.